All right. So we're going to really dive into teacher training today. We've talked about being senior teachers. We've talked about, mentoring just here and there in other episodes. But I guess really, what is the program and what are we teaching them along the way? So did you want to get started and just take a look and see what it is that your modules are and what your objectives are with them? And I guess in some ways why it's bigger than just being a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is good to have a look into the teacher programs that are out there. I think that the element that I deliver is very practical. And that's good for me because I am quite a practical person, as we spoke about before. Yeah. So it's not just a case of learning dialogue. So we are a set sequence. So if people out there aren't aware, so it's under the HOT and Hatha umbrella. So the HOT particularly is under a set sequence, 50 postures, not necessarily linked, but work in a set sequence. So one leading on in a way to another. So you'll do a pose, you'll take a pause, you'll go into another pose. So it's a good library of poses to get to know, and we do learn them inside and out. So it's easy to look at a shape, but it's also important to feel it in your own body as well. So that's why it does work to be practical. Yeah. So when people join us on the teacher training, they are given a manual that has a suggested dialogue, and that's just helping them to get into the poses, to work the pose and to get out of the pose in a safe manner. They're working the objectives of the pose so they know what it's working, what it's stretching and the benefits for it. So they really get to...
it's quite thorough.
Very thorough and in-depth. So it's not a case of like, here's your manual, go away and learn it. If you've got a photographic memory, that might be good. But to be fair...
Got to really break it down.
Yeah, it's not kind of, if you have got a photographic memory, you've got that benefit of all the information is immediately there for you, where it doesn't always then bring your own personality out because you're just reciting. It doesn't mean anything. Where when we get the opportunity to really dive into the poses, we get to feel it, look at it on our own bodies, on other bodies, and then our dialogue will evolve from what we're finding and what we're seeing. So it is quite challenging.
Yeah,
quite a daunting process as well if you're not used to looking at other bodies moving your own body in such a way.
Yeah, it's going deeper a little bit more now, right?
It is, yeah.
I liked, so my teacher training was, it was a vinyasa power, and we weren't given set poses. We knew the warriors. We knew like the basics because I came across a book and it said that there are 84, a book. I'm always going to reference a book.
It's a book.
84. No, because it was in the old studio and it was 84 classic poses. But then these 84 classic poses can turn into even more because there's so many different variations.
Yeah.
So now when I learned the HOT sequence or the Hatha HOT 50 classic postures, I really loved that there was like a framework in the teacher training program because in mine, there wasn't. There were warriors and chairs and these different types of poses, which our audience may or may not understand what those poses are. But ultimately, we weren't taught, we weren't given a set of poses. And then it's already in a sequence. We had to come up with the sequence. We had to come up with the poses. That's really difficult. And I feel like the 50 postures are really classic. Like they're literally really classic. They're across, again, maybe the audience isn't familiar with other sequences like Ashtanga or Shivananda or Jivamukti, but ultimately and I'll come to this later, but when we look at other sequences, I feel like the 50 postures are incredibly thorough. I really do think that they're so good. So what are these postures? Take us through. What do you do in these postures? Like what do you see them as,
What I see them as is like the fundamentals And I just think that the building blocks to whether you go on to teach a sequence, whether you are set sequence, whether you go on to take a vinyasa course, I think they are your fundamentals.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, we're starting off in a child's pose, where some might say that is quite a tough pose to start in because, you know, you've got to have the movement in your knees and your hips, but it's a grounding, calmer posture. But the way that it opens systematically through the body as it progressed, I think that's what makes it a really good sequence. So we get a chance to break all of these poses down. So what we would do on a typical Saturday, which we tend to have the whole day with me, we would have a hot practice, which would be open to the public as well, which is great because it brings a lot of energy. We would, that would be a 75-minute class, and that would include all 50 postures. So that repetition.
You can do a condensed version, right?
Yeah.
You can do a shorter version.
Yeah, so it used to be a 90-minute sequence, but as we've discussed before, a lot of people don't want the 90-minute now.
Don't have time.
But the 75-minute, it's a nice impact on time, or a nice use of time. It gets us to experience all of the 50 postures.
At least once, you know.
Yeah. Well, with the major poses, we can break down. We normally do those twice because either our power poses, our more cardiovascularly challenging poses. So we get a really good experience, and the teacher trainees get to see it, do it, experience it, and it's that repetition then of actually doing the practice. How do we feel? What do we find challenging? So it's self-study as well, which I think is really important.
And you guys will use props as well, right? You all in your Saturday or on your Saturdays?
Yeah. So as we then come back, we would then have a set of poses that they would have had as homework that they can work their way through. We'd encourage them to do the poses themselves. What do they feel? Where do they feel it? What challenges could they see that on bodies that don't move quite as well as ours or theirs? That's when we would then look at props as well.
In the past, did you all, because I remember, like, I know our program has progressed and it's, you know, it's kind of moved along, right? We've had pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID where we've been teaching this. Am I right in thinking that there's also, and this might come in the early stages or later, but there's a possibility where others can come in to create the pose where you can start seeing how other bodies look. So it's not just, so sometimes teachers that have the confidence to go on a course may have been practicing for a while, even if bodies are not perfect, because that's not what we want, they may not realize that they've progressed a lot. And then you've got someone that comes in every day, postural issues, and they've come and shown that. Am I right in thinking that you guys have seen that?
Yeah, we did. We've had a couple of people come in.
Nice.
They didn't want to do the teacher training, and they were quite open going to be saying, oh, I don't bend this way. I've got issues with my knees.
That's great.
And they were like, I'd love to come in just to do, for their experience, to have the time to go through the poses with the teacher trainees, but then also for us to go like, oh, look at this person in a nice way. Look, they can't sit down. They can't bend their knees this way. So what would we do?
That's powerful, because then we're saying that, you know what, we're not going to be teaching yogis. We're teaching every day, all of us coming in, what does that look like for all of us? I think that that's like a mutual benefit, really.
It was totally a mutual benefit.
Amazing.
Because they then got to have all these modifications set for them. And you know, we learn as well. We learn as teachers. Because it's okay for us to say like, oh, just put a brick there.
Yeah.
Because, oh, that gets your hips nice and even.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's like, well, actually, now that hurts my shins. And so when it's a live body, it's great. And I do think that was a huge benefit both ways.
Yeah, that's great.
And I think it's something, again, that would be really good to keep introducing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real people quite early in the teacher training.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think really it's not, we're coming away from the glamour of teacher training, right? We're coming away from the fact that we're really confident yogis going on this teacher training program. We're going to get through the program and then we're going to go teach other yogis. I mean, it's really coming away from that glamour and really being a valid, trustworthy program, looking at people from all walks of life and really becoming like posture masters.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to, the breakdown of the course, that's why it works so well. So they are given this suggested dialogue. So it might seem, once you've been teaching for a while, that you forget what it was like to teach that very first pose, where it's like, oh, it's just child's pose. Just child's pose. But when you've never taught, never stood up in somebody, in front of people, a pose that you've probably done thousands of times, hundreds, or, a good handful of times, it's probably in most yoga classes, child's pose, and you're now got to teach it. It's a bit like, oh, what are these? Oh, what are these called? What are these?
All of a sudden we have to, what are your arms and legs really doing? Because you've got to say it now.
So it's so different. We do teach in a body part verb way. So it's kind of like, what do we want to move? What do we want to do? Where's it going? What's it doing? So it is very simple, like hands and knees, walking your feet wide, sit your hips to the heels, big toes are touching, let your belly fall through your thighs, your forehead, nose to the floor.
Again, really beneficial, because I wasn't given the dialogue, and I wasn't, or forget about even being given a dialogue. There's a framework, body parts. What is your body part? And what is the verb? What is it doing? So it's so easy to faff. Because you've got to create your own words. You actually don't have a framework. So for me, it's so easy then at that stage of when I did teacher training to not fully talk people into poses and out of poses. I actually didn't realize how wordy I would have become. Do you know what I mean? And how ambiguous. And again, that could be in debate from teachers or students alike. But to have a teacher that's so clear, which I love the dialogue for that. Yeah. It's so clear, like hands together, knees apart. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so clear, especially in this day and age when we need things to be so much more clearer so we can really focus. I really love that, Yeah.
And so I do think then, coming back to when they very first start, giving them this suggested dialogue, it just gives them really the alignment cues. So they have a dialogue with the alignment cues. I'm very much the plaster off. Sarah is keep the plaster on.
Keep the book there.
I'm kind of, the first few weekends you can use your book and now take it away. Yeah. Sarah said we can have it until Christmas. Well, Sarah's not here. Let's take that book away. Band-Aid off. But I think if you've got something there, you rely on it. Yeah. When it's not there and you've had now a couple of quite in-depth weekends, it's kind of like, okay, do it. What are you doing? Tell me, what are you doing? And that is your dialogue.
No, it's so good. I think it's so good.
To be fair, at the time they hate me.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Bitterly hate me.
It's so hard.
But then afterwards they're like, well, actually, that was easier.
Sometimes you're surprised at what you can do if you were to just think about, okay, well, what are we really doing? And let me just talk about that. Because that's how you become teachers. And our program is September to March, and it feels like, oh, wow, that's a 7-month program. It's only 12 weekends. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, so actually after that 4th weekend, it's really in their benefit to now start weaning off of the book and really understanding so that we're not just reciting. We are really understanding what we're saying.
I think that's the bit. It is the understanding. Yeah. By the time you've practiced it, you've had anatomy with you, which we can come on to later. They can start to kind of realize what's going into their body. And everybody's going to feel something different. Yeah, exactly. But the idea of this is what this pose is targeting. Yeah. And it's nice that they can do it. So what we'll often do is do the pose and they shout out, what can I feel? Yeah. It might be my back of my legs. Okay, what could that be? Oh, my hamstrings. We don't dive into naming all of the muscle groups. That goes over to you. But at least, they've got that knowledge of like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. That's now stretching my hamstrings. Oh, it's working my quadricep. So they're finding those kind of like
places where the muscles are. And to be honest, even with anatomy, we only have 3 modules. Do you know what I mean? And so what we do is the way we break it down is intro. Like, we're just introducing the upper body and the lower body and the major joint movement. Yeah. Then module 2, we're going to just focus on the major muscle groups of the upper body and the major muscle groups of the lower body in module 3. And so we actually don't even go into the details. So it's just really about knowing that your quads are at the front thigh and the hamstrings are the back. but we don't go into the details of what the hamstrings are, because there are a few strings to make up the hamstrings.
Yeah.
And the quad is 4 muscles in the front. So we do go over it, but I actually just keep it. I keep it basic for that first, because it's so much information, you know? So we keep it basic as well, you know?
I think it's functional movement.
Exactly.
And that's what they need to be aware of. What does this muscle do?
It's need to know.
I think, it's a 200-hour program. We need to have enough knowledge to keep our bodies and other people's bodies safe.
Exactly that.
I think that's the taker from it. We're not doing kind of like high-end degree in anatomy.
No, exactly that.
But it's enough that we can confidently say that our teachers are going out with enough knowledge of how their body needs to move.
Exactly that.
And the muscles to move them safely, wisely. And if they then go on to do sequencing, that they know that they need to warm something, stretch something before they go into whatever posture it is.
There are muscle pairs.
Yeah.
You work one, you work the other, you contract one, you stretch the other. Yeah, it's incredibly important for us. And I think really that's my objective with them at the end of that anatomy module, is just to learn the basics of your front muscles and your back muscles, really, and how they work in pairs.
Yeah.
But actually coming on to that, there's quite a lot that we cover, in those 12, 13 weekends. It's not just for you in particular. It's 50 postures. You group them up, right? And you get them done. I would say the first half of the program, you go through the entire 50 postures in just the first half, right? Because they are broken down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's tough. So it might just be it's only so many months, but then it is being realistic, which we've mentioned before. We do make it very clear to people coming on to the teacher training. It's not just, I've got my teacher training this weekend. There is homework, and I think that is the important thing to remember, that it might be over the weekend, but there is still self-study. There'll be homework set by you from whatever you've done. Exactly. My homework tends to be once you've started getting into body part verb, start teaching friends, because you'll be surprised how accurate it makes you with your cues.
Yeah, exactly that.
People say arms up, they want them forward and they're like everywhere. And you're like, what are you doing? I didn't say do that. You're like, well, actually you did.
Yeah.
Or you didn't say not to do that.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, forward and up.
Yeah.
In your mind, it feels like, okay, well, that's what I'm saying. But actually there's a literal understanding for that person. It does make a big difference to start teaching friends and family early on.
So we do encourage that quite early.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of getting used to moving their own bodies, starting to put these cues, these things together. And it's about finding their voice as well. I think that is really important, that we need to be clear, we need to be precise. We would always say people need to know that when they're coming into these poses, we like to say work it, but what we mean is once they're in there, remind them of these cues. Are we contracting our buttocks, helping our release our hips? Are we doing this?
Are we just hanging out in the pose, or are we really
Are we
working?
Drifting off now? It's like, she's still talking.
Yeah, exactly.
And then making
really
it
focused.
Yeah, making it clear when actually we need to come out the pose.
Yeah.
So in the hot world, we always say change.
Yeah.
Just because it means we finish this pose, we're going to come
time
out
for the next one.
And we'd always encourage people to come out, whatever it is, safely. So probably the way they went in would be the way that they come out.
Yeah.
And it's finding their voice, but making it an authentic voice.
Yeah, and that kind of that leads into theory, and we'll talk about that later. Like because for my focus is what type of teacher do they want to be? Because sometimes hot is a specific style, right? So their voice is a specific voice for hot yoga, and it's a specific voice for hatha.
Yeah, I'd say it's more commanding.
Exactly.
Because if we are hot, you're practicing at 38, 39, 40 degrees. We don't want this story. We don't want too much of a soft, gentle voice, because, man, I'm hot. I'm probably getting a little, not agitated because, I'm learning to accept the heat. I don't notice it anymore. But I am in this meditative state, like we said before, that I just want somebody to get me in, get me out, make me feel good.
Yeah, no, it's very important. I think that I am a theory teacher. I am a talkative teacher, but there's a place for everything. And I really think that that's the program, right? The program is to be able to, first of all, come onto this hot hatha program and decide if the hot or the hatha is your style. And it's really interesting because sometimes you'll come in loving the hot as a practice.
Yeah.
And then realizing that you don't want to be a hot teacher per se.
Yeah.
Do you know what, like, but I'm happy to be in a hot room and I love the style, but do I want to deliver a class like that? So that's one thing that we can talk about. And the other thing is, if you don't want to be a teacher, how much do you learn about presenting, right? Your voice, standing up in front of people, learning things, like it's presentation skills, it's wellness. You're going to learn well-being. You're going to learn your poses because you guys go quite in depth in learning your bodies. So two different things right there.
I think it is. And you often get people who generally don't want to teach. Yeah. And they come along, I can think of, quite a few people who said, oh, I don't want to teach, I want to do it for my own practice. And then they were like, actually, I want to teach. Yeah. But I want to teach this. I don't want to teach hot because that's my practice. Yeah, exactly. And I really enjoy that. But you know what? That's not my style, but I really enjoy teaching. So I'm going to go down this hatha route. Yeah.
And I want to share it with friends and family or people that would benefit, or people at my work. You get a lot of that, right?
Yeah, totally. Because they do see the other sides, the sides that you go through, the theory sides, and, how it develops them as well. So it is, that self-care, love, and I don't know, just getting to know you a lot more. So it's not just the physical side of it, and knowing that there are so many different styles out there. But again, they've got these 50 postures
that are always classic, regardless of what kind. If you're going to go soft, if you're going to go hard, if you're going to go hot, you're going to go hatha. If you're going to go personal, these are still classic poses that are really good for your knees. I mean, because am I right in thinking that the history of what we teach, the classic, came from Bikram, right? Original Bikram yoga, which there's a lot of controversy around what he's done and what he did as an empire. But he had created that sequence because of bad knees. Yeah, really.
I think we've covered it before, but he had an injury from weightlifting. So he was yoga, he was pretty much lots of different things, but he was weightlifting, he was injured, and they said never walk again. So he went to his guru Vishnu Ghosh, and he gave him these 26 postures, which then he repeated over and over and over again with the heat, and it cured him.
Yeah. And I think that was behind the scenes. People are able to now correct their posture, even if they don't want to be teachers. You take them down that road of really looking at the postures in depth, right? Like they get a chance to play around, they get a chance to do partner play.
Yeah, I mean, it is very hands-on. They get to teach each other quite early. Yeah. So they'll separate off into groups. Somebody will be teaching, and depending on how big the group is, the other people will be practicing. So it's hard work because you've got a class in the morning, you're practicing 75 minutes. We go through the postures, whether it's like 5 or 6, but we don't just do them once. It's like, feel it, okay, now let's try it this way. And rather than just, this is the posture, depending on what it is, we might be looking at standing bow pulling pose. It's a back bend, standing on one leg. So obviously it's a balance, it's a back bend. So we might look at how can we create this back bend another way.
That's great.
So that we can feel it without the balance.
And there's no pressure on getting that pose, but actually what you're taking is a pose that has, let's say, 3 different things, a back bend, a balance, and whatever else it has. And you're breaking it down. Yeah. Which is, I think that's perhaps the value of what teacher training is. Like that is such a valuable thing. Yeah. To be able to really, again, maybe forget about the pose, forget about everything else, forget about teaching, but to have that time with understanding your body. Yeah. Right. And the thing is, you've been doing it for so long that I'm going to safely assume most bodies, when you're seeing them and they're feeling stuck in certain poses, there's a little trick, a little thing, a little prop that, of course, it doesn't magically open them up, but it moves them in the right direction.
Yeah. And it could be something that we've said in class hundreds of times.
Oh, that's
hundreds of times. And all of a sudden they were like, oh my God, that's amazing. Not heard that before. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, it makes so much of a difference when it's small group
it's one-on-one, one-to-one, the small groups, they all get to have a look at it. Yeah. And sometimes it could be that we might say, okay, let's have a look at Sarah standing bow. Let's have a look at Alice standing bow. Yeah. Now, what do we think? would we say one's right or wrong? Because to be fair, there is no right or wrong.
Well, that teaches acceptance then. So
Yeah.
now we're understanding really what yoga is saying, that we've got different bodies. We have different, and I'll actually talk about this too, but we come across compression and tension.
Yeah.
And when it's bone on bone,
Yeah.
there's nowhere you can go, right? So in a forward fold, if your hip and your, the head of the thigh, femur, and the hip socket, it's hollow or it's big or it's small or whatever the case is, if that's going to create pain, that's going to be your limit on how much you come forward. And then we'll also go into tension. Is the muscle tense? Is that what is preventing you from coming forward? And I think that that's great because it shows how our bodies are different and how much more ultimately we want the program to teach acceptance that we are different bodies and we're going to do different things because it's very freeing. It's meant to be a really powerful, process that you go through. And part of the power is to know that it is going to be different.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And sometimes it is bone on bone and you can't, but you get a chance to really break it down to really understand like, what am I feeling rather than classes? Because classes are only going to take it so far.
Yeah. And I do think, when you look at that, because if somebody's got a naturally curve in their back, then their back bend is going to look amazing. But is it the right way to back bend? Are they just dumping into their back? So I think it is kind of thinking like your back bend, like amazing, but you naturally bend that way. Or you might have that deep curve in your back.
But it's created pain for me actually.
Yeah.
So I was naturally over curved.
Yeah.
So it was easy to come into. But what happens is you use it as a crutch and you're doing it over and over and over again until it creates an issue because there's there's different profiles, but my profile would have been over flexible without the strength to back it up.
I was going to say,
and eventually you will then wear and tear, right? So I think that that's really important. Like it's a very humble program in that sense. We're not really teaching the fancy things.
Yeah.
We really are being grounded in what we're trying to teach.
But it just goes to show though that somebody will go like, oh my God, that's an amazing back bend. Where actually you've already said you're falling into it.
Yeah.
Where by getting to know your body a little bit more and maybe knowing about what muscles that are going to support your back, we could actually kind of go like, well, actually, you didn't even lift before you went into that back bend. How can your spine possibly take a back bend if it hasn't found and lifted space to begin with?
Yeah.
So
are we dumping in areas that we're not supposed to be like joint? Like, oh gosh, it's so common and classic to dump into our joints. Do you know what I mean? Like just to hang out in our joints, really.
Yeah. So I think through the program, it does teach us a lot about our own bodies.
Exactly
so it is very tiring. So we'll start looking at our voice. We'll start looking at how we present ourselves in the room, which may sound really silly, but there's a lot of balances. We don't walk in a balance because it puts people off because we have mirrors in a lot of the studios that are predominantly hot. Hatha, not so much so. But when there's a big group of you don't want to be walking when people are in these standing bows. And it's just that, you can be seen, you can see them. We talk about how we build our poses, we build our foundations, we build from the floor up. We have slightly different ways that we describe it, but I always go from my feet, my knees, my hips, my shoulders to my gaze. What are my arms doing?
Yeah, that's what we do. And we mirror this in anatomy. We call them, adjustment centers, right? We'll call them adjustments. And exactly that. We start from the floor up. Exactly.
Yeah. And then you can guarantee by the time you've got up to here, your feet on your knees are going, it's okay, she's forgot about me now. You can just wobble in or out. And it's like, oh, no, we've got you covered. And that's what we would call by kind of working the pose. It's a bit like, is your knee still squeezing out? Use a bit of visual. Is it pressing against a wall?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Walls are great props, I think. Walls, blocks, all these things. But you wouldn't have thought there's so much to learn just putting a pose against a wall, right? Because you can't really cheat against, not that we want to cheat. Sometimes, of course, we'll do it on purpose, but sometimes we don't even know that our bodies are doing that until you get us against a wall and there's like a partner or there's a prop or something that's really testing our alignment.
But it is our proprioception, isn't it? We don't know where we are. It's kind of like you've got your arms out, they're in the same line. You're like, yeah. And it's like,
and then the bottom is stopped down. But they'll talk about yoga being so good for brain health. And I think really that is it. Like, how do you hold your body and time and space. Because you'll have, there's some things like sensory difficulties with people, kids, etc. And they'll be the ones that fall down a lot. They're the ones that bump into things because proprioception is really poor. So isn't that amazing that we could have been those kids, or we could have been those adults, or we might be those people. But yoga's going to teach us like how it's the mindfulness to your head is looking forward to the front arm. But that backhand, again, in class, we'll hear it, lift that backhand up. But where's the meaning? The meaning really is in that 7-month program, 12 to 13 weekends, where that backhand is now being felt a lot more powerfully. And it just changes the way, I think it's just it's just an incredible way of changing the way that you hold your body in time and space and how you take care of it. And I'll talk about the theory side and what we go through.
Yeah. So I would say the practical is just that, very practical.
Yeah.
It's non-fluff.
Yeah.
It's just what we're doing, why we're doing it, how does it feel in my body, how does it look on other bodies, how can we use bricks, blocks, straps to help our students as we go out into the world to teach. Getting up, learning their voice, which is very challenging to, how to be clear, loud enough, not shouting, not to have a false voice.
And you were saying, like, how do you stand? Like, you're not going to walk in a balance.
Yeah.
What else do they learn? Like in class, like what is their class presentation teacher etiquette? Like, what else do they need to know?
It's things like, how do you hold yourself? Hands on the hips. How does that perceive? That's like, I'm really cross with you. We're not
body
cross
language.
with you.
Absolutely. The psychology of body language.
Yeah. And it is then that, it's an overall presentation. This is an experience for somebody. It is looking at the physical side, but also we want to take into account that it is their practice. So it's kind of finding that right balance. So then they're up teaching a lot.
Yeah. I remember, and some teachers will do this, but they can carry their voice, but sometimes they'll sit or they'll kneel off to the side, right? And some teachers have been able to carry their voice, but ultimately we don't want to be teaching that because, again, it is you're there to really lead, right?
Yeah.
So how do we help support you to lead?
Yeah, that's very valid, actually. It's said that if you're sitting while somebody's working, then it just drops an energy.
Yeah.
We always say that as a teacher, you are the energy, you are the battery. Even if you are not feeling it, you have to plug yourself in.
Yeah.
We give energy, we receive energy. So, you'll take energy back from your students if you can give the energy in the first place.
Yeah. And that's teaching in general. If you're going to go into a teaching role, like to be there, and most people are teaching nowadays. If they're a consultant, they're teaching. If they're a coach, if they're a mentor, there's a lot of coaches, a lot of mentorship, a lot of these types of things, which is why sometimes we'll advertise CPDs as for wellness professionals in that industry, because it is, we're all teachers now. And I think that makes a big difference. If you are there as a teacher, how do you give energy?
So we actually probably should have mentioned quite early on, but we actually teach the teachers to teach by dialogue.
Yeah.
We encourage them to do it as well if they need to, but the benefit then is they know these poses so well that they can teach it without demonstrating it.
Great. So they're not modeling it.
Yeah.
And if they need to, they will. But for the most part, they're really specific with, their words are really important now.
Yeah,
right?
It's so specific that hopefully you could close your eyes and you could do exactly what they are saying and make
it's clear,
the
it's
pose,
direct.
the shape that they want to. Yeah. Admittedly, if you've got a room full of complete beginners,
for sure,
then do you know what? Model, because we've already said your explanation of arms up leads to carnage.
Yeah.
But on the whole, that isn't the hot nature. It was to have a big room in the day, 40, 42 people, 40 degrees heat, 40% humidity, sweat, buckets of it around you like a swimming pool.
You've got to be really clear, really direct.
A lot of people are like, that's gross. But you know what? It's not. It's amazing.
I know.
So to be able to teach by dialogue it's a good benefit. Also, if you're not feeling very well, if you're carrying injury, do you know what? You can still work,
Exactly.
You can still teach.
So I was,
can save energy.
My program was different. It was taught by modeling. So you're on your mat, not all the time, not glued. Some teachers were glued to their mat and they were doing it, but most of the time you're there showing them. But again, it was more showing based, not dialogue based. So I actually took the hot training as a second CPD. And that is actually where my teaching became really at that next level. It was really that next level teaching because the words were so specific. The body part verb was so clear.
Yeah.
It gave me a lot of foundation, whereas the other ones were great programs, but because they come from power vinyasa or like a different style, it was up to interpretation.
Yeah.
Do you know? And I just felt that, there wasn't really too much of a strict guideline, which some people like, but I just felt like it really changed my practice and my teaching when I went to teach the hot style, because it has so many of these things embedded. It's a sequence that is scientifically supported with movement. Like it's really like pose, counter pose, right? It's so good. And again, like you say, the way that it's dialogue led, I just thought it was really useful for me as a teacher to be a better teacher, I think, my interpretation of that.
Yeah, I think that's where the energy comes from. Like we're saying about people sitting down to teach. And obviously, if you're doing it with them, they're doing a seated pose, then I would say sit down and do it with them, because you don't want to be trying to stand up and do something that they're doing on the floor. That's because true. Sometimes it just doesn't work, or you'll get somebody who'll stand up and try and copy you and you're like, no, don't do that. But yeah, so, we want to be moving our energy around the room. So we're not always stuck in one corner.
Great.
We might start on the side, you might walk through the side, because then you've got that different plane. You can see people's bodies from different angles.
Great.
You can stand at the back, you can use mirrors, you can see everybody. And, if they're hot and bothered and suddenly you're sat down, you're slouching.
Yeah, of
it
course.
doesn't
It's
give
different.
a very professional, I just look bored.
Yeah.
And, this is somebody's investment in themselves. It's time, it's money. And I'm kind of just going, and just do this. It doesn't really work. So, it is giving the teacher trainees this kind of experience of like where they should be standing. There's times before that you will see people, if you've been to hot classes, if they're at the front and they're doing like a pose where you ask them to look at your own eyes in the mirror, they will kind of squat down, but then the energy is still in their voice.
Yeah.
I would always say, if you can move out the way, move out the way.
Yeah.
And we do use our voice, and that's another thing when we come back to the voice. It's not just about them talking through the poses. It's kind of like, if you want to lift an energy, then lift your voice up. If you want to drop the energy, then, talk a bit slower, a bit calmer.
Yeah, that is true, because I think that's a big thing that they learn with you is like intonation.
Yeah.
Do with their voice, you're going higher, greater, bigger on those peak poses. You come down in the softer ones. It's not the same level, the same energy 100%, because you do have the lifts and the lowers.
Yeah.
The cardiovascular poses, heart rate lifts, heart rate lowers.
Yeah.
It's so well designed,
Yeah. But I think it gives it a spark of interest as well. Because if somebody's got the same tone, that same energy level for 75 minutes, you would be exhausted as a teacher, because that is just not doable. But also as a student, you would just be like, please be quiet.
Yeah, of course. And and yoga wasn't the thing with yoga in general is that it is fitness and wellness, right? Like there's going to be the power.
Yeah.
But it was always muscular and organic.
Yeah.
Mixed together in a dance, right? Like ultimately.
We like to say it's a dance, and we like to say it's a bit like an orchestra.
Yeah.
So you've got your ups and your downs.
Yeah.
And once people
ebbs and flows.
And if we also encourage our teacher trainees to observe classes. So that means not doing it.
Yeah.
And it would either online they can do it, but ideally in the studio. Yeah. So they're sat at the back, paper, whatever it is, want to quietly, of course. And then they get to observe how the teacher moves around the room, how the students react to the cues, the wording that they use. And it's quite surprising that when you read the feedback back, how they do notice that there are the lifts and the lowers, the difference in the tones.
They see it in a different way when they step back and watch it all, right?
And they're like, wow, that it really is very eye-opening.
It is so, the best word that comes to mind from my side of things coming into hot yoga later, because I've only been trained in hot yoga, I would say 5-6 years, whereas my first training was 13 years ago in power.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was really well designed. It's just really incredibly well designed on all of it, based on body part verb, the cues that you're using, dialogue led, energy up and down, sequence itself, like all of it comes together. It's really well designed from someone on the outside looking in, which actually brings me to, even though we've touched upon it before, I think it really makes a big difference. If you can just remind me your training, your original training, it was in Thailand, it was hot yoga. So just any more about that? Like just, where, how, what was the background? Like, did you hear like the history of where you guys came from in your hot yoga lineage?
So I'm absolute yoga trained.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they're no longer about at now. But so I'm going back 2007.
Okay.
So they did their first teacher training, which I was on in 2007. And it was originally based on the Bikram sequence. So it's actually the 26 plus 2.
Yeah, because that's what I see a lot of, 26 plus 2, but we call it the classic.
Well, it actually changed after the first one, because at the time Bikram was trying to copyright his 26 postures. So what Absolute did was they then created their own sequence of hot,
like a variation.
Which is what a load of other studios did. You'll see lots of things like Fierce Graces and different things have done hot. So theirs became 50, not because it was better, because they still use the same idea of systematically opening out the body.
It's all systematic, no matter what.
Yeah.
So just to clarify here, because this is what I would have thought, but also other people that are listening, hot yoga doesn't necessarily mean the sequence that we're talking about. It could also mean flow, which is something different, which we can come into.
Yeah.
But my question for you is, there's Bikram, 26 plus 2, classic 50.
Yeah.
They're all very similar, but there are differences. But ultimately, it follows the similar pattern?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of the idea is, whether it's the Bikram or the Absolute, it's a set sequence. It's in the heat. It's 40% humidity, was the original 40% heat, which is supposed to replicate the Indian sun.
Yeah.
So
their
that's
external environment, basically doing yoga outside.
Yeah, so it's warming the muscles before you started, and you've got that focus, concentration to move through the heat.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like where my background started. But because of the approach of making it so clear and precise, then when I went on to do other training, so I still teach, I teach like flows now, vinyasa flow, and I teach yin and other things, but not so much in yin, but within the flows, I still work with very much that like body part alignment, setting my foundations up.
That was your foundation of teaching.
Yeah, and lots of people say like, that was really clear.
Exactly.
I really understood that.
Exactly.
I know where I'm coming from.
Exactly. I think that it did give you a really good base, and I think it increased my teaching by having the secondary.
Yeah. But the good thing is though, that on the program, and it's something that, you can touch on, that we do take it then beyond the 50 poses. So we are giving the, the students that come in these 50 poses, like we said, that they can do so much with.
Yeah.
One of them might be, you've got your warrior 2. So if you're not sure what that is, you've got your arms out, front knee over the ankle. But you can make that a bit funky then. You could put eagle arms into it. So you can really jazz it up. Yeah, once you've got those fundamentals, those basics, you can start adding on. You can link them together in quite creative ways.
Well, I'll say that is really what we have designed. You and I coming together, creating our program, we have come together with the value of the history of where you've come from, classic 50, hot yoga, but also not hot.
Yeah.
And the value of the heat, right? And the value of the dialogue and the value of talking in a specific way and being precise. So for me, I came from hot yoga as well. But mine was power vinyasa. And now this is different. There's a little bit of a history here. So Baron Baptiste was the father or the founder of Power Vinyasa Yoga.
Yeah.
And he's got a sequence. There is a set sequence in Baron Baptiste Power Yoga. But now modern day yoga has taken, so if I'm going to be a little bit clearer, we've got these older traditional set sequences. Ashtanga is one of them. And we've got, in essence, Bikram, right? Like that's another, and there's other versions of these. So power, rocket, heated power classes, the things that we teach, in essence, has come from Ashtanga yoga.
Yeah.
Ashtanga yoga is the vinyasas, the constant movement and breathing, transitions. And in between all of that, you've got your warriors. You've got the same thing that you'll see in our hot poses, those 50 classic postures. You're going to see it in power, not all of them, not every time, because it mixes. But there is more cardio. It's more cardio. So that's where my background was. Mine was more Ashtanga Vinyasa, which means more movement, more cardio. It's not static. Yeah. And I think that that's the difference. Hot yoga, or the original 50 classic 50, is systematic and static.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Whereas power yoga is just, it's constant movement with rest, with child's pose, with things like that. But it's just cardio. It's just a different version of yoga. So when we did hot yoga, and I'll come back to, students' questions. When I did hot yoga, when I trained in hot yoga, it was hot yoga, but moving power vinyasa hot yoga. And so it's different. And so we weren't really looking at such value that you guys were saying, in a sense of clarity. There's also a set temperature in hot yoga that you all come from, which is definitely that 40 degrees, 42 humidity, like there's a set. Whereas hot yoga actually, and we have this on the website as well, what is the difference between Bikram hot yoga and just a hot yoga studio? We aren't so specific of course, we're specific on our temperatures as a power yoga studio, but it could be 32 for heated. It could be 38 for hot. So these are the differences that people will say, like, what are these differences? And again, most people may not even, maybe it's too technical, right? And so again, maybe if you're in that teacher sphere, then this is interesting, but really, I guess the main thing is how hot yoga could be set sequence, or it could be vinyasas and movement. It could be static. And that's really an important thing, I think, to take home. And what we teach is definitely the original from Bikram, with a set temperature, with a set dialogue. And that's like really a framework. And it's just been so useful.
Yeah, it's specific. It's not just yoga in a hot room.
No, exactly that. And that's the difference. I was yoga in a hot room.
Yeah.
It wasn't that original hot yoga.
So to me, it's kind of like the hot yoga is the purposeful heat, the set sequence.
Exactly.
The, like, say, static movement. That to me is like hot yoga.
That's the original hot yoga. And that was just really the biggest point really to bring home. Because I had questions. I didn't understand that I was yoga in a hot room. Do you know what I mean? And actually hot yoga, there's a different culture out there.
Yeah.
And this is what brings us all the way back to why we created the program that we did. So you've got this practicum. Yeah. You're taking them through their voice, the poses, the cues, and starting to really get the practical aspects of teaching, right? And alongside this, when you're with them on Saturday, they meet me on Sunday for theory. And I am all about exploring, right? There's no right or wrong. There's no black and white. It is, so I can go systematically through what we did, and we're going to come back to going beyond the postures, right? So we start with anatomy, which is probably the most science specific that we get into, right? So we start with anatomy. And there's no two ways about anatomy. Your joints move in a certain way. And these are the yoga postures that open your joints and move your body in different ways. So we're very clear and scientific. And that's great because we start with anatomy while you are introducing the manual, the postures, the initial start, right?
Yeah.
So we're kind of side by side. And again, this is cleverly designed, that two of us coming together and doing that.
Totally, because they get the theory from you, they get it practically from me.
And we're starting physical.
Yeah, and they can actually start to marry it up rather than hearing all this anatomy and then not understanding
use those words right away.
Exactly, yeah.
Extension, flexion, you're going to start using those words. So I'm teaching them what does that mean theoretically.
And I think because you've got the crossover, it does become more relatable. And I mean, I've got the memory of a fish. So to me, if I could learn something, I can forget it. Where if I'm learning it with you and then it's being reinforced by me, because
cleverly designed.
Exactly. And we're all different learners. So I'm the doer, I'm the visual learner. Exactly. So it's really good then that if we are in a position, they've learned, what's this doing is extending, flexing, dorsiflexing, whatever it might be. Yeah. And that's what they'll start to say as well when they're in the shape. Oh, I feel this here. Oh, okay, that's your hamstring. And what are my knees doing? Yeah. What are my hips doing? What are my wrists doing?
Exactly.
If my knees coming outside, is it adducting? Exactly. And they start using these words, and because all of a sudden it makes sense.
Yeah. And starting it early on means that we can repeat it throughout the next 12 to 13 weekends, 6 to 7 months, because anatomy is really hard for a lot of people, right? Like even if it's clear, it's still complex, do you know? And so I think it's really, again, cleverly designed that we start early on. We have these anatomical terminology words early on, linked with the moving early on, and we just repeat it. So it feels overwhelming at first, but we always say to them, trust the process. Because we have really thought this out on when to start talking about this. And then we just keep repeating it throughout the program. So you have a better opportunity to get it to stick because you are doing it both auditory, visually, like doing, like mechanically. So really good. So we definitely start with anatomy alongside what you all do.
Yeah.
And then my next module with them is the science of yoga. It's the science of well-being. And so what I do with them quite cleverly, because yoga is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And the spiritual is the harder bit, right? The philosophy of yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, things like that. So I don't start that right away. I actually start with practical. So yoga for strength, yoga for flexibility. What is strength building? It's resistance, like isotonic, isometric movement. So we get into what is yoga for strength. And then we look at yin, restorative. This is where I start talking about the different types of physical practices. Then we go into the science, the second one, about breathing. Then we're talking about breathing, the nervous system, the cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, how it activates sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system. What is your nervous system? It is your brain and your spinal cord. But we start looking at, and the thing is, it's not just online. It's not just lecture notes. We actually stop. We do quizzes. We do breakout room groups. We do discussions. So it's really, so we can really embody the learning.
I was about to say, so it's, it is kind of embedded. It's not kind of a bit like, here's a screen.
I'm just going to talk to you for 6.5 hours.
Which is like,
exactly.
Zoned off. Yeah. And I think when it's interactive.
It's interactive.
By this point, they're comfortable. They can ask you questions.
And we have some great discussions. Just as you would, of course, we do have some great discussions during teacher training. And you always have people coming in from all different walks of life. Some of them could be physios and they have a high amount of knowledge in certain things. And some, this is the first time, or they've had, there's just so many different people coming through, and they do provide a lot of insight. And I'm very proactive in making sure it's inclusive and we're really talking about different things. And then if it becomes too complex, we park it, we move on, we get back on track, So that's number 2, we go into the science. And I do think, as much as I'm a theoretical, like, let's just think and explore, I do love things rooted in science. And so one of the things that I definitely did bring to the program was to add the science of it, so we are looking at like how the brain works. So let's say, for example, if you've got a certain trigger or fear and you see a stick on a road and you're scared of snakes and how quickly you could think that stick is a snake. Like, so we actually talk about like the brain science of things, you know, because we're talking about wellness and we're talking about yoga and why is it good for wellness? So we start talking about how it goes through the brain body science and how you can actually recondition thoughts. So we talk about that. And then the third module for this is now we're looking at the philosophy. But again, we root it into like real life. So when we talk about the yamas and the niyamas, the relationship with yourself and the world and how you are in the world, you know, like this is the foundation of yoga as a behavior. Some people call it the 10 commandments of yoga, right? Like, because there's 10 altogether. But it's really about, you know, like how do you interact with people? How do you interact with yourself? Like, and so we really just look at that, but we also look at real life examples. And so it's really nice, you know?
I think that's the thing though, isn't it? I mean, you've got these kind of 8 limbs of yoga, but how are they put into our everyday living?
Exactly.
And, you know, I think it is important to realise that it is not all about the physical, the asanas. You know, these limbs are really important.
Yeah. And it's crazy because what people will see then is that what we're focusing on is definitely 1/8 because asana is the physical.
Yeah.
But that's 1 of 8, you know, like because before that is the foundation of behavior and thoughts.
Yeah.
And after that is the breathing, focus, concentration, and connection. And so we really notice how small the physical practice is when you're putting it against a bigger backdrop. But I always try to make it relatable and practical, you know, so it's something that, yes, of course, it's been thousands of years old, but how we're using it for wellness now, how these philosophies are being used for wellness, taking time, breathing, increasing your focus, etc.
I think that's really important on a teacher training package. And that's to have like all aspects of it. You know, and he's keeping it true. You know, there is a long lineage to the yoga. I mean, it's not been created recently, has it? You know, it's been there thousands and thousands of years. So, you know, I think it is important to keep that in sight. Like, why do we do this? Where did it come from? I think it just keeps it authentic.
It really is. And actually, we're bound by it if you are going to be a Yoga Alliance certified school, you know, because we are a yoga school and our program is certified. That is our duty in some ways, because that's what the agreement was, right? For Yoga Alliance UK, Yoga Alliance USA, was that the program has to have history, philosophy. It's got to embed like where yoga has come from, which is lovely that that's there. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you have to be that teacher. So this is now where we come into about December time. We're about, 3 months in. And now we're talking about the business of yoga. Now we're talking about the ethics. We're talking about what did traditional teachers used to be and what are modern day teachers and how it is us making a living. And I guess inner beliefs as well. Should we make money off of yoga? Can we make money off of yoga? But we have some real life debates about these things.
What I think is nice on the program as well is that we actually get a couple of people to come in that have made their
guest teachers.
Yeah, guest teachers. Yeah. That's probably a way of putting it. That are, walking the talk, whichever way around it is.
Yeah.
These are people that have actually been on the program and are now teachers, and how did they do their advertising? What,
marketing, advertising yourself.
It's extremely difficult.
Branding
it's not
yourself.
just a case of like, oh, I'm going to go and teach a yoga class tomorrow. It's like, okay, where?
Yeah.
How you're promoting yourself, if you've got, insurances.
Exactly.
So it is very nice, I think, to bring in real life people rather than just kind of giving you that textbook, like this is how you do it.
Yeah, exactly that. And again, it's skills that you pick up that are interchangeable or transferable, I should say. So to learn about, your identity, because we will then actually do a personality test. And these are like well-known ones that corporate offices will also use as well. And some people have already done them, and some people, and there are different kinds. There are more recent ones. There are older versions, etc. So we'll talk about that as well. But it is an opportunity of getting to know yourself, because how you present yourself again is branding. Like, how are you going to brand yourself? So it's important to know, if you're a spiritual type of teacher, then your imagery might be a little bit more spiritual. Like, like how are you presenting yourself? Are you presenting yourself as a very practical one, a spiritual one, an emotional? Like, what is your image? What are the words that you're using? And if you don't want to be a teacher, how do you want to present yourself in general? Do you know what I mean? When you go out to do anything that you want to do.
And that's, really important, isn't it, for the marketing? Because if you want to attract the people that are going to like your class, then you've got to make it fit. So like I said, if you are this more practical teacher, there's no point putting kind of like, I don't know,
things that don't really align with your values.
And then when they come, they're like, oh, this looked like it's going to be more meditative.
Yeah.
You get the classic one of somebody sat in lotus and then you're there like music pumping up and like really strong vinyasa. It's a bit like, oh, we're not doing that, are we?
Yeah. No, it's important to, and we do align that up. We align. And I think, again, it's just about getting to know yourself and what your values are. And maybe sometimes being surprised at what you like as a fitness. Maybe you really love fitness yoga, but you want to teach the wellness, right? Like it's an incredible opportunity to understand yourself more and what you really like. But what I feel like was missing in mine and perhaps yours as well, because we came together to create this, seeing what was missing in our own, right? To create something well-rounded. But one of the biggest things is to create threads of what's out there, because there is a culture out there. You'll go out, because these are the things that happen. You'll finish a program and then there's always work politics around it. So I'm going to go and now start working for studios or gyms, and I don't belong in this studio. Like it's my teaching isn't really authentic to this studio. It's really important, right? Like to see, because some of them are really fitness focused and maybe you're not. Or maybe it's really wellness focused and you're like, hey, I really love the fitness side of it. Yeah. So it's like aligning up. It's just alignment, right? It's really understanding who you are and what you like, and also being open-minded, that even if it's not your yoga culture, where it's come from. Kundalini people, right? They've got their own thing. Everyone's just, the yoga culture is so broad. There's so much out there. And I'm sure people listening to this podcast, maybe themselves, they've seen it on Instagram. It could literally go from turban wrapped Kundalini, white gown, yogic, like that type of stuff, to, just modern day fitness. Do you know, like it's just so broad.
It is. And I think it is that as well. And it's aligning yourself with the studios that it's going back to being authentic. If you suddenly want to fit in with the studio, you've got to respect a studio if, this is what they offer.
That's what it is. It's respect,
and
but it's not
I totally get that. But it's also the fact of you shouldn't really be changing yourself to fit into something that makes you feel unauthentic, if that's even a word. I think, it's being respectful for your studios, but, if you are asked to teach in an extremely spiritual way, everything in Sanskrit, and that is not you're not going to come across as authentic, and you're not going to get your followers.
Yeah, and you won't be happy as well. And sometimes you might want to go out, just like any other job or anything else. Maybe you do want to fake it till you make it. Maybe you do want to wear the masks and just see how it goes. But eventually you'll want to find what's right for you, just like any other work environment, work culture.
But that's the thing with the program, though. Like say, you're giving them time to really delve into like what makes them tick, what sort of teacher do we want them to be, or do they want to be? And then I think at the end they've got that complete package. And it's just a case of, I'll always say to them, when the chance comes up, teach. Because I found that after I'd finished my teacher training, if somebody would, if I went onto cover lists and they're like, do you want to cover? And I'd be like, oh no, I can't cover because made a reason up because I was too scared.
Yeah.
It's, this first time is scary, but I always think, normally, whether they know it or not, they've just done 200 hours and probably more.
Yeah.
They know an awful lot.
And we do see a lot of people going out there and doing it in some ways. Maybe we can take better statistics on how many actually turn over and go and become teachers, even if they said that they weren't.
Yeah.
But I do think that we give, and not just for us, but I do think that programs that are really thorough and created well, give students, as much as they're scared, confidence to go off and teach, even perhaps a little niche. Because, I have been surprised at how many people do. Obviously we're not going to name their names, but just, we've graduated at least over 100 people, right? Like in programs. And it's just amazing to see how a lot of them are going out and being brave and teaching and working what they are,
Yeah. But the thing is as well, they have to be proud of the fact that they have pretty much taught from day one. Mm-hmm. So we've taught them.
Which is why you take away the book, which is so good.
I am the bad cop.
I was like, keep your book. How am I supposed to teach? Of course, teachers will teach with their notes or if they don't want them, but it's so good to create bravery, I think.
Yeah. And I, just to finish off, I just think that we have taken, I would think like what I would want to do on a teacher training to feel that I've got something, a real solid base, whatever I want on. I could do another training afterwards or they could do a training afterwards.
Exactly that.
But they've got these fundamentals, these foundations. And every time I go back to our classic, I always go like, this is like coming home. Mm-hmm. My body thanks me afterwards because, vinyasa, I can
take it or leave it.
I can cheat.
Yeah, exactly that.
I can move through. But here, I've actually really got to work on, I can feel this. I've really got to work on my standing, my balance. And it's just the focus that it gives afterwards.
It's very thorough.
Focus during, but the feeling afterwards. And I'll always say it feels going home. It's an honest practice.
It is a very honest practice. And it's also the standing postures and the balancing and the floor and the hands and the knees and the detoxes at the end, like those deeper ones. It's really well designed. Like your whole body from head to toe is really well balanced. Whereas sometimes creating a sequence like the vinyasas and the power, they may not necessarily be working every single thing unless the teacher is very skilled. Yeah. But for the most part, again, they're creating it. Whereas this was already designed as a science on its own, which is an incredible thing. Yeah. And coming to the very end of this, we then go after business and traditional modern day teaching and, talking about all of that. We go beyond the 50 postures because I want them to understand, just in case they do go around the world, they'll see that there's so many different practices so that they understand that what is power vinyasa? What are these different, what is Ashtanga? This is the oldest form. It's 2,000 years old. And it's where the 8 limbs have come from. It's where Patabi Joyce, like these traditional teachers have come from. So I want them to know, I think it's really important for them to see how we take a set sequence and we can mix it up a bit, and that's really the end of it. And at this point, it's close to exams. And so I won't introduce that. Again, very designed well to introduce it at the end. Because they've been living and breathing the sequence for 6 months. And some of them are bored and they're ready to just think about more stuff with their mind if they're really creative. Yeah. And some just want to know what else is out there, but stick to the sequence.
Yeah. Well, it's embedded then, isn't it? It's not going to confuse them because we don't want to be introducing something halfway through. Exactly. And it's like, well, Sarah said we do it like this. And now you're telling me to do it like this. And it's like, okay.
No, it's very consistent.
So, and I think towards the end, that's perfect then because I know that they do go off and make their own sequences, which I think is great then because when they do go on these cover lists, they've got something that they've
really
practice
broad
they've
then.
done
They're
with
well-rounded.
Yeah. And they can just literally, they've got a set sequence that they can dive in and out of. Although we look at 75 minutes, we give them 2 60-minute variations of it.
Short
So that's already,
versions.
2 class plans they've got.
Amazing.
And then if it was something a little bit more movement, a little bit more funky, then they would have covered that with you.
Yeah.
So they've got actually a good toolkit to be leaving with.
It's an incredible, I just, so just not really to talk the program up too much, but I do think that we've come together looking at the way that we've been trained and how just the value of what both lineages, because we do come from 2 different lineages. We come from 2 different mindsets.
Yeah.
But actually, ultimately, it's still yoga. We still feel the same thing. We still have the same value. How do we bring these 2 things together and really open up a huge opportunity for people coming in and what that looks like on the other side?
Yeah.
So thank you for talking more about your side of the program and just really bringing this to life more. And I look forward to catching you again on our next podcast, as always.
Yes. Thanks, Sarah.
Have a good one. I'll see you soon.
Bye.